All right, the 2-week freak out. So this is something I started experiencing when I was new, again, because I probably wasn't doing a good job setting expectations, but I went ahead and added this to the list because I think it's good to talk about. It's an overarching thing that covers a ton of stuff, but when you talk about it, you can refer back to it. So the idea is that when you're getting a home loan, when you first go under contract, the lender and the title company, they're all going to ask for all this stuff. And then it's just going to kind of sit there for a week or 2 weeks or so. And then by that time, you're about 2 weeks till closing. And they're going to start they're going to start checking the title. They're going to start doing all this pre-approval stuff. And they're going to find things. Or repairs are going to be found. And so stuff's just going to pop up around that 2-week mark. And so the idea is that no matter what, every deal is different. Something is going to pop up, right? A skeleton's going to pop out from behind a corner. Me as the realtor, I don't know which corner it's going to come from, but I'm telling you there's a skeleton in the room and it's going to pop out somewhere. So that when it pops up, I can say, here it is. Here's the thing I told you about, right? And that's the idea here, is that all this stuff that's going on is going to come to a head in about 2 weeks. And if there's problems, it's going to pop up. And if lending and title and repairs are all good, something's going to happen. It's going to cause everyone to kind of freak out a little bit. Happens on every single deal. But remember, we're all working to the same goal. Seller wants to sell their house. Buyer wants to buy the house. We're all on the same team. We're all going to work together. We're all going to try to get it closed. So you can have that conversation up front. This is why it's so important, too, side note, to work with vendors that you trust, lenders, title companies, because this happens on every single deal. And I've had agents say, you told me this. You said, I had the most smooth deal that ever closed. And you don't say that kind of crap until after it closes, because the minute you say that is when some of this rears its head out. So you better knock on wood anytime you ever say that again. Luckily, it had closed already.
It did close. I'm dealing with one.
The other one, yeah. So it makes up. Yeah, it makes up for it. But there's something on everything, right? You're dealing with humans, one, and you can count on humans to do, what humans do, which is be unpredictable. And so you can count on that. And then we're dealing with houses. We're dealing with tons of money and humans. So something's going to happen. And so when you can work with good vendors, a bad vendor or a vendor you don't have a good relationship with, when something goes wrong, they're trying to play the game called save my butt, throw someone else under the bus. And so when something goes wrong, and the lender might say, well, the realtor didn't get me this and this until 2 days later, or the lender still hasn't gotten me this, and it just starts playing the blame game with each other. You work with good vendors, and we all start to try to fix the problem, right? You work with people you have good relationships with, we all start to fix the problem. I've gotten in passive-aggressive arguments with lenders and title companies all the time because they're just starting to throw people under the bus and say it's not their fault. When at the end of the day, it's all of our jobs to make sure it gets done. So if something doesn't get done, it is our fault. Why didn't you ask me for it, right? If I forgot, you didn't ask me. So it's a team sport. We're trying to get it done. So when stuff goes wrong, explain we're all working towards the same goal, right? We're all trying to get to the finish line. Buyer wants to buy, seller wants to sell, but explain to them. I usually have this conversation either at the beginning at Starbucks when I'm meeting them like we talked about, or at the time of contract when we're writing it and say, here's kind of what's going to happen next. But just be prepared, something always pops up between title, lender, inspector, repairs, something's going to pop up. Everyone's going to kind of freak out, but don't worry, we're going to get it taken care of. And sometimes nothing freaks out, but stuff pops up and I don't have to reiterate what I told them. The story I always tell that kind of illustrates this is I had a client that was buying a home. They were a football coach, high school football coach in El Reno, and they got a job as a high school football coach in Guthrie. So they sold their house in El Reno, moving to Guthrie. It was summertime when they were making the move. The lender, this is something most lenders do, the day of closing or the day before closing or the week, will call your employer and say, hey, is Miller still employed? Do you still have a job? Just to make sure they don't give you a loan and you don't have a job. So they called El Reno school system, said, hey, is Chad still employed? They said, no, he quit 2 days before closing. So I'm in South Dakota with no service, and this is all happening. Shelby was my lender, but everyone's like, okay, we can't close tomorrow because my guy didn't have a freaking job. So everyone's freaking out. Sellers already moved out of state. Buyers had everything in a truck, right? Their house was closing the next day too to sell. So it's just everyone's freaking out. What are we gonna do? You work with the right vendors. Shelby ended up calling the superintendent for the Guthrie school system, got a handwritten note saying that he's employed and this is his salary and blah, 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 and gave it to his underwriter, and we ended up closing the next day. But stuff like that, you couldn't have predicted that. I didn't know that the secretary at the El Reno school district was going to say that my buyer quit his job. So all that kind of crap, you just don't know what's going to happen. Something's going to pop up, but when you have the right vendor, we're all working together, we're going to get it closed. Does that make sense?
So he switched schools?
Yeah. Yeah, he switched jobs. So he was employed. He had an offer letter, but he hasn't gotten his first paycheck from the new system yet. So the underwriter wanted something, so we got the superintendent of Guthrie School System to write a letter. So silly stuff, right? But you couldn't have predicted it. I didn't know.
They called the wrong person.
She was trying to get out of the office to go to lunch or something, and it's like no, he's gone, click. And so you can't predict these things. So again, all kinds of stuff pops up that's going to pop up, and not just the normal negotiations, but something's going to pop up, and it's like, oh crap, we need this done yesterday. I need you to get me this. We're not going to meet closing. There's all kinds of stuff. So again, warn them of that, so that when it happens, you can say, okay, here's that thing that always happens to everybody. Calm down, don't tell anyone to calm down. No one's ever calmed down in the history of being told calm down. So you can kind of set that expectation, like, hey, told you this was going to happen, we're going to get it taken care of. And then you can start going to work on fixing the problem instead of panicking. Does that make sense?
Do you always tell them, like, if something is happening that not necessarily is involving their help, you don't need their help with fixing the problem?
What do you mean?
I don't know, like, something with the lenders happening, lender, title, either one, they really can't do anything, the buyers can't do anything. Do you tell them, or do you wait till you...
Yeah, full disclosure on issues.
Yeah.
I get this question a lot where it's like, hey, something might be blowing up. Should I tell the other realtor? It's not blown up yet, but it might be. I always get in front of that communication, always. Because again, it's easier to have a communication about something that's not a big deal yet, that might be, than something that is a big deal currently right now. Does that make sense? So it's like, hey, heads up, my buyer told me this, or I'm talking to the other realtor, it's like, told me this, probably gonna be fine, nothing's probably gonna go, but I wanted to make sure you're aware of what's happening. Then if it does blow up, I already prepared them, and it's not like jumping at them. So yes, almost always, not always, but almost always full disclosure is best. Just for the sake of, that other realtor and that other homeowner, they got their own houses they're buying, money they're spending, they're doing stuff too. So you owe it to the goodwill of the transaction to make sure everyone's informed. And if something's blowing up and it's like, well, we can't do anything, communication is the number one way to keep someone calm, making sure they know what's going on. If you've ever been in a situation you don't know what's going on, part of you freaking out is because you don't know what's going on. If someone would just tell me what's going on, I could rationalize it in my head, right? So communication will help keep people calm as well. So full disclosure normally is always best, making sure everyone knows what's going on. Because they might be able to help you. We might be able to work it out or work it around, or say that's not important, or we can do this instead, all kinds of stuff. So full disclosure for all the buyer and seller, just so everyone knows what's going on. Most of the time is right. I'm sure there's an instance where I'd be like, "Ooh, don't tell them that." Like if the buyer's like, "I don't want the house anymore," it's like, okay, let's figure out a way to maneuver, massage the situation. Don't just tell them that.